and thanks for joining me today. My name is Lynn, and today I'll be making a custom flip card using the Gift In stamp set from the Greeting Farm. This is one of those stamp sets that actually has the front and the back of the image, which I love. I think flip cards are perfect for stamp sets like these because when you flip it, you get to have that reveal of the back of the image. So I've sort of set up this extra camera here to show a close-up of my coloring. Not that I am the world's best colorist by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought my overhead doesn't really do a good job of getting close in, and also because it's straight overhead, a lot of times my hand is probably covering up a lot of what I'm doing. So this one is angled at to the right so that it's or to the left of my image I should say, since I'm right-handed. And with skin tones, as I mentioned probably once or twice already, I did invest in some Copic markers of a variety of different skin tone colors, and skin and hair are probably the two areas where I'm really trying to get a lot of practice in because it's just a lot of fun to color these characters. And I always start with the skin and hair because if there's going to be an area that I'm not happy with how I colored, it's likely going to be one of those two. So if I ever need to abandon an image, at least it'll be early on in the process. But usually I'm not really all that picky about how I've colored an image. I just try my best to put some highlights in, put some shadows in, and I've very rarely, if ever, have I actually abandoned an image. So with this hair, I'm going for black hair, but I have used a blue-gray as my lightest color, which I thought was kind of nice because it gives the hair a little bit of a blue tinge, which is kind of neat. And for the eyes, just to really deepen them, I used a black glaze pen. And looking at this up close here, I realized that my stamping, I probably should have used a stamping platform and stamped this image twice just to get a very, very solid black outline. But I'm actually okay with it being a little bit imperfect. I'm not too much of a stickler for things like that. But once I've got the face and hair complete, and I will try to list the Copic skin tones that I use, and either put that on screen or put it in the description box below if you are interested. But for the rest of the image, I'm using my Ohuhu markers because I don't have a wide range of Copics. I only have the skin tones and then a couple of other colors. And then as a final touch, I used my white gel pen to add that white highlight. Now for the back of the image, you get the back of Ian by himself, not holding anything at all, but then you have some options for things that he can hold in his hand. So I've chosen to go with the gift box, but there's also a bouquet of flowers and a teddy bear. And what I've done in advance is stamped out Ian and the gift box onto, I use Avery repositionable labels as my masking tape, but you can use proper, masking sheets if you want. It's very low tack, and you can stamp on it. It doesn't have to be a perfect stamping. And what I did was I cut out Ian's arms because I want the arms to be in front of the gift box, but the gift box needs to be in front of parts of his body. So I'm lining up his body and then putting my gift box mask over top. And then I'll stamp that a few times to get a nice crisp impression there. And then I'll peel that up, and that's when I realized that there's a portion of his hands that actually still need to be visible on top of the gift. So what I did was I just cut my gift box mask and trimmed off a little bit more of it so that I can actually stamp out Ian's hands and sleeves. And this wasn't perfect because with that change in thickness between the mask and the paper that I'm stamping onto, it's really hard to get a stamped image right on that edge. So all I'm going to do is just take a fine tip marker and fill in the rest. And so you can easily do that if you ever find that you have some imperfect stamping. And I'm not going to show the coloring of the back because I basically used the same colors as I did on the front. But now I'll show you how to make the flip card. So this was 8.5 by 11 sheet of heavyweight cardstock. It's 120 pound, and I've trimmed it along the 11-inch edge to 7 inches. So now this measures 7 by 8.5. And I'm going to draw a couple of lines around the center of the card. This is an easy way of figuring this out without having to really do any math to figure out dimensions. But this oval is part of a nested oval die set that I have, and it's 1 or 2 sizes larger than the oval that I used to die cut in. And I did die cut it once out of just lightweight text scrap paper so that I can find the center of the oval by just folding that piece of paper in half. And the 2 lines on the screen that you see are the 2 lines that I drew. So the red line is where I'm trying to match the center of my die. And then the blue line is the other on the other side, which is where I'll line up my cutting plate to do a partial die cutting. So I'll actually run this through twice and do 2 partial die cuttings. Once from the left up to the red line, and a second time from the right up to the blue line. So that between the red line and the blue line, my oval will not be cut. And you'll see that in a second here. So I'm just going to make sure that my paper here is lined up with my die, and then I'm going to match up the edge of my paper with that first line, the red line that you saw before. And then I'll make sure that this oval is nice and secure. And you can do this with any shape, really. And between the 2 lines is 1 inch. That's what I always put in as a space between the two lines there. And that seems to always work out really well for me. And I'll do that first partial die cutting, and here's the second partial die cutting. So you can see I've lined that up with the second line, what was the blue line on the screen previously. And I'll go ahead and cut that as well. Then what I'll do is, once I take this die off of here, I'll score on those 2 pencil lines. But I'm not going to score all the way through my oval. I want my oval to be nice and solid. All I'm doing is scoring on my pencil mark from the edge of the card to where that oval cut begins. So you can see I stop there, and then I pick it up at the bottom of the card, and then I'll score up to meet with that partially die cut oval. And I'll do the same thing on the other side too. So I'm just doing some partial scoring here. And one of these folds will be a valley fold. So I turned my card to the backside and scored on the backside. The reason why I score it the first time from the front is because that's where my pencil mark is, so I know where that line is. But then I scored it from the back because usually when you fold your score lines, you want to fold them as mountain folds. So the leftmost one, that goes through the center of our oval, that's going to be a mountain fold, and the next score line will be a valley fold. And so when you have that completed, your card will look like this. But if you want it to be a standard size, now is when you can trim this down to, in my case, I'm making a 5x7 card. So I'm just going to trim off the extra little bit I have on this card here. And I'm going to trim a little bit off of both sides just so that I can get roughly, it doesn't have to be exact, but I was just eyeballing so that the oval that I have is roughly in the center of my 5.5 inch or my 5 inch width card. So that's basically how you can create a custom flip card. And you can do that with any shape die that you have and in whatever card size that you want. I happen to need a 5x7 card because this stamp of Ian is actually a really nice size. He can really carry the focal point of a card really well. You don't really need much more than just him, and so that's why I decided to go with a slightly larger size card base than I normally create. And so what I'm going to do now, the rest of the card is going to be pretty simple. It's just going to be some mats and layers. So I've just picked out some pattern paper that I'm going to mat behind Ian on the front. And because from the front side you can see the green sweater that he's wearing, I've chosen a green cardstock. But just to pick up more of that blue in his hair, the blue from his jeans, I'm going to put a matte layer of blue pattern paper on the inside of the card. So I'm cutting that down to, I think it ends up being 3.5 inches wide by 7 inches tall. There's not going to be a white border on the outside, but on the inside though, I picked one oval size larger than the one that I used to create my flip card. And I lined it up so that my that oval flip was centered. And that way I have a little bit of a white matte layer right around the oval. And I think that you don't have to necessarily do that, but I like the look of that. I like just having the matte layer there, especially since I knew I was going to use another shade of blue pattern paper on the back of this oval. And so I just didn't want the two pattern papers to butt up against each other. So having that little bit of a white border between the two to separate it, I think works well. Or at least to my eyes, I like it. And so I think I have just about everything, all the pieces except for the sentiment, which I always leave this to last. I never really think about the sentiment until the end when the main card is complete. So what I have here is a set of I think badge dies from Tonic Studios, and I did stamp out the For You sentiment, which does come in the Ian stamp set. And I've just used a couple of my badge dies to cut out the sentiment and the backing plate for it as well. And so now I'll start to assemble everything. I like to use a dotty tape runner along the edges, and this one's from Crafter's Companion, which is, as you can see, really sticky. It barely touched the paper, and yet it was grabbing really aggressively. So it's a nice tape. So I did end up having to put a little bit of liquid glue as so that I could have that little bit of wiggle room as I tried to get this oval to match up exactly. And it does need to match up exactly because it does have that flip mechanism, so it needs to be able to move within the cut areas there. And so you do have to kind of just take your time, use some liquid adhesive, and really get these matte layers to fit perfectly, because there isn't really any wiggle room there. And so once those are in, though, everything else is pretty smooth sailing. And in fact, the whole card, as you can hopefully see, is pretty simple to put together. You don't really need any specialty dies to create a flip card. And this way you can customize it to whatever card size that you want and whatever shape you want in the center to flip. And if you didn't want to have, mats and layers, you don't necessarily even need nested shape dies of different shapes or different sizes. You could use any shape die, like if you have a nice frame that you want to use, then you can make that work too. So now that I've got my pattern papers down, I'll go ahead and adhere into the front and the back. I just really love that, once you flip, it clearly looks like he's holding something and he's hiding something behind his back. And it's not until you open the card that you can see exactly what it is he's got back there. So I love the stamp set. It's super cute. And I love that there are different options for what Ian can be holding too. So as I mentioned earlier, the gift box is 1 out of 3. So he's got that, the teddy bear, and a bouquet of flowers as well. So lots of different options, and that makes it really usable for any occasion. So you could make this a birthday card, you could make it a Mother's Day card, a new baby card, a get well soon card, whatever you like. So I love how versatile this is and how cute the image is as well. And it's just a fun card to create. I think it's one that people will really enjoy playing with, and using that sort of flip action to reveal what he's holding behind his back. So that's my card for today. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider subscribing to this channel and leaving a heart, a comment, or sharing this video for others to see. Thank you so much, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fantastic day. Bye!